abundant bait fish can make midsummer walleye fishing a challenge. But up next, Jon reveals how to turn the tables on the toughest of bites.
Had a pretty good feeling when I saw that one that we were going to be able to get that one to bite. Here's what we're doing today. We're fishing a deal where the bite is starting to get a little harder. And what's making the bite get harder is there's a lot more bait now. We're into that midsummer time period. But there are some things you can do that we're going to talk about today, especially when it comes to float fishing, but really fishing in any presentation, that are gonna make it so that you're gonna catch more fish, even when it gets tough. Because walleyes like this one, he's got a lot more choices now. And once he gets all these choices, he can actually pick and choose what he eats. He's not running around just so doggone hungry that he eats anything you put in front of him. Now he actually can pinpoint a little bit more what exactly it is that he wants to eat. Now it's a little tougher to fool him. And that's just the way fishing gets. It gets that way on every single body of water across the Midwest. As summer wears on, there's just more and more opportunity for walleyes to find something to eat that they really, really want to eat. And that's when you gotta really be dialed in presentation-wise. And that's what we're gonna talk about today. Those little tips and tricks, the little things that I've learned over the years, whether it was tournament fishing on the professional walleye trail or guiding, those little tiny things that make it so that you can get bit even when the fish aren't necessarily biting everything that comes by in front of them. There's a big difference in your day if you can get those fish to bite, because ultimately you can double, triple your bites. You start doubling and tripling your bites, especially during the dog days of summer, that's a lot more fish at the end of the day. There's a lot of fish right there. Oh, nope, there he went. Wow, was that fast? Holy moly. That's the cool thing about getting on fish and getting right on top of them, is a lot of times you can make them bite fast. And that's one of the things I would tell you about this time of the year, is remember that these fish have so many feeding options right now that they can eat about anywhere and any time they want, because the lake's full of feed by the time you get to midsummer like this. So one of the things I'll tell you is that being right on top of them with your bait is super important. So that's why you don't see me sitting still. A lot of days I'll sit still and I'll fish an area where fish are moving around and eating. But here's the thing, these fish, they eat more at this time of the year, but they can eat any time they want. And they can eat anything they want because there's so much bait in the lake. So one of the things that I think is really, really important is being right on top of them and suspending a bait there. And that's why I love bobber fishing. I mean, bobber fishing in general, it's probably my favorite way to fish. I love pulling spinners and Lindy rigging and cranking, but fish like that one right there, he's not needing to chase right now. There's no reason for him to chase. There's all kinds of bait in the system. So what I'm doing right now is just setting this bait right over the top of his head. If that bait's right over the top of his head, a lot of times he's not moving, but he can't resist it. So here's the thing. One of the things that is really, really important, and it's funny because I came across, my wife and I were out fishing here just a couple weeks ago, and we came across a guy and his kid out fishing, and they were struggling to catch fish, and we were driving around and catching them in the same fashion we are today. Okay, my wife was actually doing the majority of the catching. But here's the thing. I told them that what you got to do is make sure you're up above the fish. They were fishing right down there, right where the fish are, toward the bottom. A A lot of times being up above them makes it so those fish will sit here. They might see something swim by and decide not to bite it. They might see a bait drop down right in front of them and decide not to bite it. But suspending it up above them a lot of times makes it so, and you got to remember, their eyes are on top of their head. They look up and eventually they're looking up, and they just can't resist, and they come up and grab it and go right back down. They're not chasing horizontally until they want to eat. But if you're going to catch fish that aren't necessarily on a feeding binge like we're catching right now, here's what you got to do. You got to be up above them. You got to give them time. You got to suspend that bait there because they're not necessarily always going to grab it right away like if you were coming past them horizontally. That's why float fishing is so doggone effective in the middle of summer when these fish start scattering out and they've got all kinds of things to eat, because you can put a bait there and make it so they got to look at it for a long time. And if you can do that, you can usually get them to bite. Got him. It's another one of those back of the boat fish. Feels like a pretty good one. Yeah, feels like a good fish. Another one of the biggest keys when you get to this time of the year is understanding that these fish have so many opportunities that you gotta be really stealth. And what I mean is this, they can't feel you. If they feel that float, if they feel you, they're just gonna spit it out because there's so many options to eat. They don't need to grab something that doesn't feel right. And you know, you can tell me that a fish has a brain the size of a pea. Well, I'll tell you what, I have always been amazed at how a walleye can sometimes grab a bait, take it down, and then just spit it out because they know something's wrong. And that's just the case as far as I'm concerned of, they're a heck of a lot smarter than we think they are sometimes. Great walleye. Look at this. What an awesome fish. So one of the things I do is I use a single split shot. Boy, I stuck him right in the bone of his mouth. The good news is it's in the bone. He's not going to be hurt as soon as I get that hook popped out of there. But what I do is I use a setup. Settle down there, buddy. I'll get you back in the water. Look at that awesome walleye right there. But I'm using a setup that is a single split shot, and I'm going to show you here, because I think it makes a big, big difference. This one single large split shot right there, that's what I'm using, okay? And this one, actually, that fish threw that split shot, so I'm actually just gonna clip this one right on there and show you. Then, I'm using a Thill float. Now this Thill balsa float, you've heard me talk about it many, many times. What makes a Thill balsa float so good is it's made from premium balsa. And this Pro Series float, wobble bobber, any Thill float that you buy is made from that balsa. And these fish, they just don't feel that. When I've got that single larger split shot on there, 16th ounce jig, it's weighted perfectly that every time this float goes through a wave, it'll actually almost submerge itself just a little bit. I mean, that's how close it is. So when that fish grabs it, he doesn't feel that float going down. That's a big, big deal. And then the other thing you'll notice is when I go down, I don't do one of these deals where I say, oh, let him go for a while. When I see that float go down, I start reeling slack out, and as soon as I feel that fish, I set the hook. Because here's the deal, we're in deeper water now. That fish, when he grabs it, he goes straight down, and he's usually got it in. I mean, he grabs that whole thing, he goes down, and it takes you a little bit of time to get that slack out because of being in deeper water. If you were to sit there and say, well, we'll let them eat it, we'll let them eat it, we'll let them eat it, and then start trying to take the slack out, a lot of times they'll realize something's wrong because they'll start feeling that jig head or something, and they'll spit it out. So the minute I see that float go down, that's when I start reeling to them. And then about the time that I'm getting to them and I see that bend in that rod tip, now I know that I'm right on time to set the hook. That's awesome. Got him. Feels like a pretty good fish. You know, even when these fish have everything they need to eat, everything you feel like they're gonna need for the whole remainder of the summer, you know, you can still catch them. I mean, I'm driving around looking at balls of bait on my screen. There's fish under balls of bait. It just comes down to getting a little bit more precise with what you're doing. And that's all we've done today. We're just trying to be more precise, look more natural, paying attention to all the little things. And if you do that, you pay attention to the little things, you can catch fish right through this period. I mean, look at this walleye I'm gonna show you. He is fat. I mean, he is got plenty to eat down there. Look at how fat that fish is. I mean, that fish is just a giant when you look at his belly for a, you know, a 21-inch walleye. Look at that fish. But you know what? Even though he's got tons to eat and he's just eating like crazy, you can still catch him. Just make a few of these adjustments. Try to be right on top of them. Work really hard at being right on top of these fish. Put the right colors down there. You know, use a float so that you're sitting right on top of them for a longer period of time. Here's what's gonna happen. You're gonna find out that you can catch them even when the conditions get tough. Sometimes the toughest conditions are just those middle of summer periods when there's a whole bunch of bait. You can still catch them though. That's an awesome day right there.